think today's gonna be a fun one. Just wait. Today is a rare day of me having neither of my children because they are both off with their fathers. And it is very fitting that today I'm recording, due to procrastination, this video about the ways in which single parenting may be easier. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but my kettle is going because I'm gonna have some tea. I considered wine, but then I decided against it because it would make me really tired, and I am trying to take full advantage of this child-free evening. After this, I'm doing some yoga and I'm watching some Netflix or some Apple TV. So let's get into it. Today is a rare day of me having neither of my children because they are both off with their fathers. And it is very fitting that today I'm recording, due to procrastination, this video about the ways in which single parenting may be easier. I don't know if you can hear it in the background, but my kettle is going because I'm gonna have some tea. I considered wine, but then I decided against it because it would make me really tired, and I am trying to take full advantage of this child-free evening. After this, I'm doing some yoga and I'm watching some Netflix or some Apple TV. So let's get into it. I'm going to be responding to an article from some months ago about how after COVID and a lot of relationships ended, there were some moms who talked about the easier aspects of parenting on their own, or of single parenting. And we'll get into all of it in terms of what we're considering single parenting and all that sort of stuff. But just kind of like bear with me or roll with me because I'm a little excited, all right? That's just what it is. This was an article written by Insider, and I will link the article in this video description so you can check it out for yourself. It's titled, "Moms Who Went Through COVID Breakups Say Solo Parenting is Much Easier. For some, it feels like a cheat." Let's talk about it. I'm going to read 3 bullet points from the article. After the relationships ended due to pandemic stress, some moms say parenting got much easier. Without partners, they say, expectations are clearer and self-care is more attainable. And lastly, some even feel guilty about how much they prefer solo parenting. It was interesting for me to read this article from both a professional and a personal perspective. I will say the things about the article that were relatable to me are that it interviewed a couple of women, maybe 2 or 3 were actually mentioned in this article, but there's one woman who has a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, as I do, and one of them is parenting, at least one of them is parenting with 2 separate fathers, which is also my circumstance as well. So let's start with kind of defining or identifying single parenting, single motherhood. I think for the most part, people say, well, it's obvious, you're not with someone while you're parenting. But what if you're in another, relationship with children from a previous relationship? Are you still single parenting? What's going on? So for me, I recall really giving thought to this after the first of my 2 significant breakups. So the one from the father of my oldest son. And I remember saying to him, I am not a single mother, but I am a single woman. So the fact that we're not in a relationship anymore, so I am single in terms of a relationship, but you are actively involved in our child's life, and so I'm not single parenting. Fast forward about 7 years. My ideas on this have changed a little bit. It's still single parenting if you are not with the parent of your child. Now, you absolutely may still have a solid parenting foundation for one of 2 reasons, or both reasons, which is that child's parent is actively involved and you guys are co-parenting, or you are in another relationship in which there is a step-parent who takes an active role in that child's life. So to say that you are single parenting isn't to say that you are necessarily doing it all on your own, but it is to say that you are not in a romantic relationship with the parent of that child. One thing that I enjoyed about reading this article was that it validated some of my own experiences that I'd never really had much conversation with anyone about, which is this idea that as challenging as it is to be in my home on my own with my kids the majority of the time, I was able to recognize, or I've always been able to recognize, the built-in breaks that I get because they have other parents who are involved in their lives. So obviously, this brings up the fact that everyone's circumstances are different. Not every single mom has an active father in their child's life and therefore does not necessarily have that built-in break unless they have someone else who is taking on that responsibility for them. So I figured a good way to start out is to identify things that either the women in this article or people in general I may identify as being challenges to parenting together. So when you're in a relationship with somebody and trying to parent. For instance, having differing parenting styles and living in the same home and being in a relationship can cause a lot of conflict between some parents and can cause a lot of tension within the family unit. Something that wasn't mentioned in the article, but that is a huge thing for me, is this idea of single parenting while in a relationship. This load or this burden that oftentimes in a heterosexual traditional relationship tends to fall to the mother. This load of doing a lion's share, an inequitable share of the parenting. And so the fact that many people are not considered single parents by society's standards, but if they were really breaking down the division of labor when it comes to parenting, they might find that they are almost single parenting, that the parts that are that they are being supported in or being well supported in might be the financial help and might be having another set of eyes on the kids or having someone to leave the kids with when they go somewhere. So meaning like the father. So the father might be financially contributing to the home. The father might be there physically to watch the kids when mom goes out somewhere, runs errands, goes out for herself, whatever. But when it comes to the big topic nowadays of mental load and being house manager, things like that, it falls on her. By no means am I claiming to have an exhaustive list of all of the factors involved, so I'm sure there are other things that may come to your mind when you think of challenges of parenting together in the same home while in a relationship. And if any do come to mind, I strongly encourage you to talk about it in the comments because I really think this is an important discussion and I would like to continue it past this video. So let's talk about the downsides of single parenting. As I said before, this is not an exhaustive list, but a couple that were mentioned in the article was this idea that when the kids are with you, and it comes to the day-to-day task, it's just you doing it. So that's bedtime routines, that's waking them up in the morning, that's picking them up and dropping them off from school or getting them off the bus, or any of the things you can think of, taking them to the doctors, stuff like that. So when you're doing it on your own, a downside is having no physical support in the day-to-day moments. Another point mentioned in the article is the financial stress. So going from a potentially 2-income household to a 1-income household, you usually feel that shift, that change, that burden, and likely have to adjust your life accordingly in order to maintain a certain lifestyle. There are 2 things that came to mind for me that weren't mentioned in the article. One can be the lack of moral support in the moment during challenging moments with your kids. What I mean is when it's just you and you're with the kids and there's a tantrum or you're going through your own parenting anxieties or the child is sick, things like that, you may not have that in the moment support from the other parent because you're not together. You might have a co-parenting relationship where you can call that person up at any time, and if so, that is one of the things, as I said, people's circumstances are different. So that would definitely be a benefit of having a good co-parenting relationship. But many times that's not an option for people, and so you're just really dealing with the in the moment parenting stuff on your own without that other partner there. When you're in a relationship, those moments are still hard. Having a tantruming toddler, it sucks for everyone all the time, but at least you could potentially have that other person there. Now, what I will say is that even in a relationship, as I mentioned with the single parenting part, you can feel very unsupported by your partner in the parenting process. So it's not inevitable that you have the support you want if you're in a relationship. But there's definitely more likelihood to at least have that other person available to you for moral support when there are when there are challenging moments happening with your child or just you as a parent. The worries that we all have, the concerns we have for our kids, and being able to talk it out with someone in the moment and have them, talk you off the ledge or at least problem solve with them and be able to and to not feel so alone in those moments. That can be a benefit of being in a relationship with someone when parenting. Another thing that came to mind for me is being a single parent in a community of partnered parents. So going to school events or living in certain neighborhoods that have a lot of families, that can give a sense of loneliness and isolation. And so I think that's something that maybe isn't really talked about much, honestly, because I don't know why, but I think that it is something to consider. So this applies particularly if you move to a new community where you don't know anyone, and so that's already isolating. And so maybe you are deliberate about trying to meet people and expand your social circle, but can find it a little hard to break into circles where there are a lot of partnered parents and things like that. But also, if you're in the same community that you were in when you were in your relationship, that can be a challenge as well, because there can be stigma to having gotten divorced or separated or breaking up. So this challenge can come up in both situations, but this is something that I think is just an interesting thing, because there's something to be said for the fact of when it comes to building your social circle and your social support, that this idea of befriending partnered parents can be a little tricky. Hey, I just want to take a moment to mention my Bitter to Better Breakup Recovery Program, which launches November 1st. It's an 8-week group coaching program for women who are recovering from breakups. You get a digital course, a PDF workbook, a members-only Facebook group, and you get group coaching calls with me. There's also an option for some one-on-one calls as well. But if you have any interest at all, join my email list or join the Bitter to Better wait list. Both links are in this video description. So now let's get into some of the perks of single parenting. The article mentioned 4 particular points, and then I have one to add. The first point being the fact that you can set clear rules and boundaries in your home without the interference of another person. So if you're doing it on your own, then you are able to decide how you want your household to run, the things that you want your child to learn and understand and practice when they are with you, and you can set those boundaries and those guidelines without the other parent interfering, at least not physically or in the moment. The other parent may have their thoughts and opinions about some of these things, but there are probably a number of those things that other parent is not even aware of. So it definitely simplifies the process of setting boundaries and guidelines for your kids while they're in your home. Of course, what comes with this is a certain amount of giving up control upon your child being in the other parent's home. So they are going to be able to set their guidelines and boundaries and rules for their home as well. Another point made in the article is this idea of a healthier environment for the children. So this applies if there was conflict in the home when you were with your partner. It's definitely healthier for a child to see happy, thriving, separated parents than warring, sad, angry parents who are in a relationship. I mean, at this point, there's more and more research into becoming more and more understood that divorce alone is not harmful to children. The tension, the vitriol, the anger, the dysfunction that can come from divorce and just come from relationships that aren't healthy, that's the culprit. Plenty of people, and you may be one of them as an adult, have these experiences of wishing their parents separated a long time ago. It would have been easier for everyone. This is in no way to glorify separation and divorce, but it absolutely is to give a realistic perspective about how humans function, which ultimately is we are going to better develop. We're going to develop in a more healthy fashion when we are in environments that are not high in tension and stress. So what we want to be thinking about is, what is my child seeing? What are they observing? Are they observing me in an unhappy, problematic relationship, or are they seeing me not with their parent and either in a new relationship or single, but doing better and thriving, being at peace, maybe being able to show up for them in better ways because my attention is more focused on them rather than being distracted with my relationship issues, or my physical time is more available because the way my life circumstances have shifted, or my emotional presence is way better because I'm not as stressed, or at least not emotionally as stressed due to issues in the relationship. One woman in the article mentioned the idea of built-in breaks that, as she put it, married people or people in a relationship with the other parent don't get. So this idea of when you have an arrangement where the children go between homes, then there are these built-in, usually scheduled or pretty structured breaks that you have, or at the very least you're able to communicate with the other parent as to when they will be with the child. So it does allow this more structured, planned time for you to have time to yourself, to handle your business, to engage in your self-care, to work if you need to, things like that. This woman also mentioned a sense of guilt for having those built-in breaks and for sharing that she's having a hard time. So I think what she was saying was the fact that she feels a little guilty about talking to her married friends or her partnered friends about the tough time she's having with parenting, because at least she gets these built-in breaks that they don't ever get. And I think this goes a little bit to what I mentioned before about having friendships and social relationships with partnered parents. That can potentially be a struggle. It completely depends, obviously, on the people involved and how understanding they can be. This idea that we're all walking different paths and have different challenges. Everybody's situation has pros and cons to it, as I'm describing this video. The pros of being partnered with the other parent and the cons of it. As well as the pros of being a single parent and the cons of that. So ideally, you're able to foster a social network of people who, even if they're not in your same circumstances, can be understanding and acknowledge the fact that everybody has a hard time in some way. Another point from the article is this idea of no more scorekeeping between partners as to who's doing what, such as household chores. So not having that friction that can come about when we're talking about the equitability conversation of each person doing their fair share of things, which I want to be clear is not about equal, because that's 50-50, but it's about equitable. What percentage feels good to each person for each task? So one of the women mentioned that in the article as well, this idea that there's not this tension and frustration of going back and forth, because your home is your home, so you're responsible for keeping it clean and organized, or maybe you're teaching your children to help out, but you're not going back and forth with a partner about these type of things. And of course, this applies to more than just household stuff, but kind of any joint things that you might be doing with a partner. It can help by doing the single parenting thing. You're not in a position to keep score. Something that's not mentioned in the article, but something that I realized, is that being a single mom has motivated me to foster my children's independence in ways that might have been delayed had I remained in a relationship. So I'm talking about things like my son helping out around the house a bit more. He hates flies. They really annoy him. And so recently he's gotten into taking the fly swatter and killing them. These are things that I, of course, would have been teaching my child, but there are certain things that definitely came about a little quicker, but still in an age-appropriate way. For him to kind of handle certain things. Like, hey, I might be handling something, in a session for work, because I work from home, in a moment where he sees a fly, and he, in the past, would have come and said, "Mommy, can you kill the fly?" And then he started just kind of deciding that, hey, these flies really annoy me. If my mom is not immediately available in the moment, am I capable of attempting to kill the fly? And it's actually provided him with a lot of agency, and he's really proud of himself, and this is a great skill to build. He also got into helping to wash the dishes a little bit because he had interest in it and said he wanted to give it a try. I had an awesome nanny at one point who really spearheaded helping him learn. And so now that's something that he's capable of doing. It's not an official chore of his at this time, but it's something that he has some basic skills in doing that I definitely was more in a place of handling those sort of things while in a relationship, because these routines that we go into, being house manager, all of those sort of things were happening. And as a single mom, it puts me in a position oftentimes of a bit less convenience on certain things. And so it has helped me kind of stop and think and ask myself, are there certain tasks here that my children are capable of learning if I show them the ropes, and that ultimately build their skills, their agency, and their confidence? And the answer is yes. There are many. And so it's helping me to really notice those things and help to promote that development in them. Another point made in the article that I hadn't ever considered was this idea of both parents being able to genuinely provide their support and assistance to the other person now that they're not in a relationship. Not to say that people don't genuinely provide their support when they are in a relationship, but this mom just made the point that now that her and her partner are no longer together, when they ask one another for help on certain things, they feel more free to say no when it's not something that they can actually do or should do. So pretty much they feel more okay to set certain boundaries, so that when they do say yes, it's more likely to be genuine and that they're doing it out of wanting to help or support the other parent, because they're not in a relationship living together where they feel like they have to say yes to this or have to say yes to that in terms of parenting. Now, to be clear, of course, that's one of the burdens of parenting, is that you have obligations to your kids, and you might have to do something that isn't a part of your usual routine when it comes to your kids because the other parent is sick, or they have to go to work, or they have to run out, or maybe they want to do something recreational for themselves, and so you pitch in, sort of thing. In an ideal, well-functioning relationship and parenting relationship, those are the type of things that are happening, even when you don't necessarily feel like doing it, but you understand the purpose of it. Someone needs to go to work, or they need time to themselves, things like that. But just a point that she made that I thought was interesting was the fact that when her and her partner ask one another to do things regarding the kids, that person is more likely coming from a place of genuinely being able to do it and wanting to do it from a more positive place. So now that we've talked about the article, I did want to talk about a couple of tips to try to make the single parenting journey smoother. Two main ones are fostering a positive co-parenting relationship with your co-parent, and the other is being willing to adjust your routines to your new life circumstances. In terms of the co-parenting piece, of course, that's oftentimes easier said than done, and I do hope to provide more content on this channel about fostering positive co-parenting relationships. Currently, I have one video about how to deal with a controlling ex. So sometimes that may be where some people need to start. They need to set certain boundaries with their ex in order to have a healthier relationship with them. But I also want to provide some proactive tips around communicating with and coordinating with your co-parent. But for now, I will say that setting healthy boundaries is a key aspect. Having clear, effective, mature, honest communication with them is one. Setting up schedules and routines is definitely one. And showing genuine positive regard to them goes a long way, or can go a long way in fostering a healthier, more cooperative co-parenting relationship. The other tip is about being flexible around your routines and processes now that you are a single parent. Because when you were in a relationship, I'm sure various aspects of your life were different, and you had certain ways of functioning then that may not be most conducive to you now. I'm thinking of things like when you are parenting on your own, you have two hands instead of four. What are things that help you set up the life for you and your children as smoothly as possible? I'm thinking about having a toddler and it being a challenge to go out of the house and go in public and do things with a toddler who has their own mind about what they're going to be doing. So it definitely put me in a position to rely more on delivery services like grocery delivery, food delivery, delivery of household items. So I definitely became someone who went out a bit less to do my shopping and adjusted my life and decided to put resources financially towards certain things that helped me with convenience. Everyone's life circumstances are different, but that's just an example of ways to think differently in order to shift the things you need to shift. I got a part-time nanny at one point because that was helpful for me for childcare, and I hadn't previously had a nanny, and there was a time in my life where I'd never considered getting one. But there are definitely things that I've come to realize are very beneficial for me now in this phase of my life, and these things will shift as my children get older and different circumstances come up. So I encourage you to think a little bit outside the box and to be a bit flexible in your thoughts on what resources may be helpful to you, and starting to utilize those more or bring them into your life if they're not already there. This applies in so many areas: financial resources, food, transportation, childcare, household maintenance, getting a housekeeper or hiring laundry services, all sorts of things. So if you're finding things to be a bit hard or tricky, it may be beneficial to take a little time to assess the various aspects of your life right now and determine if there are areas where you could utilize certain resources.
Thanks for watching, and don't forget to click the link to join my email list. See you soon.
What is this?